The world stopped spinning the moment Julian spoke those words, his voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. I love you, but I still can't resist other omegas. My heart, so full of hope just seconds ago, plummeted into a void where trust used to live. We stood in the kitchen of our small Seattle apartment, the scent of fresh paint and pine from the nearby forest lingering in the air. Tomorrow was supposed to be our wedding day, the culmination of 2 years of love that had weathered storms I thought we'd conquered. I, Elias Torres, a 25-year-old beta with no claim to the primal hierarchies of alphas and omegas, had believed Julian Carter, my alpha fiancé, chose me for me. Not for my scent, not for some biological mandate, but for the quiet moments we shared, late-night talks on the fire escape, stolen kisses at Pike Place Market, the way he'd hum off-key to my favorite jazz records. Now, his confession hung between us, heavy as the rain clouds rolling over Puget Sound. Julian's hazel eyes, usually so steady, darted to the floor. His broad shoulders, which I'd leaned on through every crisis, slumped under the weight of his truth. Elias, I don't want to hurt you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But it's like this pull. It's not just attraction, it's instinct. I thought I could fight it. I wanted to scream, to throw the engagement ring I'd worn for a year across the room. Instead, I gripped the counter, my knuckles whitening. Instinct, I echoed, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. So what am I, Julian? Just the safe choice until a better omega comes along. No. He stepped forward, reaching for me, but I flinched. His hand froze midair, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Julian was 26, an alpha in every sense, confident, protective, magnetic. He worked as a marine biologist, spending long days on the coast studying orcas, his passion as fierce as the tides. I'd fallen for that fire, for the way he made me feel like I belonged in a world that often reminded betas we were ordinary, unremarkable. But I wasn't enough. Not against the primal pull of an omega's scent, that biological siren song alphas like Julian couldn't ignore. I'd known this risk when we started dating. In a world where alphas and omegas were bound by nature's rules, betas like me were often the outliers, the ones who loved without the promise of destiny. Yet Julian had sworn I was his choice, not his instinct. When did it start? I asked, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay composed. This pull. He hesitated, running a hand through his tousled blonde hair. It's not one moment. It's always been there, in the background. I thought I could control it, Elias. I thought loving you would be enough. The words stung worse than any rejection. They weren't just about him. They were about me, about the life we'd built together. The apartment we'd painted sage green, the dog we'd adopted from a shelter, the wedding vows I'd spent weeks perfecting. All of it felt like a lie now, unraveling with every syllable he spoke. I turned away, staring out the window at the city lights blurring through my unshed tears. So what now? Do we call off the wedding? Or do I just wait for you to lose control one day? Julian's silence was answer enough. I didn't know if I could face the next 24 hours, let alone a lifetime of wondering if I was enough. But as the rain began to tap against the glass, I realized something. This wasn't just about Julian's confession. It was about me, too, about whether I could love someone who might never fully choose me. The next morning, the world felt different, heavier. I woke to the sound of Julian packing a bag. I'm going to the coast for the day, he said, his voice strained. I need to think. I owe you that much. I nodded, too exhausted to argue. As he left, I sat on the couch, clutching a mug of coffee that had gone cold. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend, Mara, a 27-year-old omega who'd always been my rock. You okay? Julian seemed off when I saw him at the marina. I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain that the man you love is torn apart by something he can't control? That you're fighting a battle against biology itself? I typed back a vague "I'm fine" and set the phone down. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning in questions. Could I trust Julian again? Could I trust myself to stay in a love that felt so fragile? Desperate for clarity, I drove to the cliffs near Deception Pass, a place Julian and I had visited early in our relationship. The wind whipped through my dark hair as I stood at the edge, watching the waves crash below. This was where we'd first said, "I love you," where Julian had promised to defy the expectations of his alpha nature. Now, it felt like a graveyard for those promises. As I stood there, a figure approached, a woman, mid-20s, with sharp features and a cascade of auburn hair. She introduced herself as Quinn, a park ranger who'd noticed me lingering too close to the edge. "You look like you're carrying the world," she said, her voice kind but direct. She was a beta, like me, and there was an unspoken understanding in her eyes. We talked for hours, about love, about the weight of living in a world where alphas and omegas seemed destined for each other, leaving betas to carve out their own paths. Quinn's words stuck with me. You can't control who someone loves, but you can control what you're willing to accept. By the time I drove back to Seattle, the sun was setting, and I felt a spark of resolve. Julian and I needed to face this, together or apart. When I got home, Julian was waiting, his eyes red-rimmed. "I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice raw. "But I need to be honest. The pull, it's stronger than I expected. There was someone at the marina today in Omega. Nothing happened, but I felt it, Elias. I felt it, and I hated myself for it." My heart sank, but Quinn's words echoed in my mind. This wasn't just Julian's battle, it was mine, too. I had to decide what I could live with, what I deserved. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not just about tomorrow, but about everything." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd planned our wedding, where we'd laughed over takeout and dreamed of a future together. Now, it felt like a battlefield. Julian's hands fidgeted with a napkin, tearing it into tiny pieces as he struggled to meet my gaze. "I want to be the man you deserve," he said finally. "But this thing inside me, it's not something I can just turn off. It's like a current pulling me under, and I'm fighting it every day." I leaned back, crossing my arms to keep my hands from shaking. "Fighting it how? By avoiding omegas? By pretending it's not there? Because that's not working, Julian. You're telling me you love me, but you're also saying you might not be able to stop yourself. What am I supposed to do with that?" He flinched, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. The one who'd spent hours teaching me to kayak, who'd stayed up all night when my mom was in the hospital. But that man felt so far away now, buried under the weight of his biology. "I've been talking to someone," he admitted, his voice low. "A therapist who specializes in alpha-omega dynamics. She says it's not about willpower. It's about rewiring how I respond to those instincts. I started sessions a month ago, but it's slow." A month ago. He'd been grappling with this for weeks and never told me. The betrayal stung, but part of me understood. Julian wasn't just fighting for us. He was fighting himself. Still, the question burned. Could I wait for him to win that fight? "I need time," I said, standing up. "I can't marry you tomorrow, Julian. Not like this." His face crumpled, but he nodded. "I understand. I'll stay at Mara's tonight. Give you space." As he left, the apartment felt too quiet, too empty. I called Mara, spilling everything. She listened, her voice a steady anchor. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said. "But you need to ask yourself what you're willing to fight for. Julian's not the only one who gets to choose here." Her words stayed with me as I wandered the city the next day, the day that was supposed to be our wedding. I ended up at a small cafe in Capitol Hill, a place where the barista, a non-binary beta named Riley, knew my order by heart. Riley, 24, with a buzz cut and a knack for reading people, noticed my mood immediately. "Rough day?" they asked, sliding a latte across the counter. I laughed, a bitter sound. You could say that. I told them the short version, leaving out the alpha omega details. Riley listened, their dark eyes sharp with empathy. Sounds like you're at a crossroads, they said. Love's messy, but it's not supposed to make you feel small. You're Elias freaking Torres. You're worth more than someone's half-hearted promises. Their words hit hard, echoing Quinn's advice from the cliffs. I spent the rest of the day walking, thinking, letting Seattle's gray skies mirror the storm inside me. By evening, I found myself at a community center where Mara volunteered, hosting a support group for betas navigating relationships with alphas and omegas. I hadn't planned to go, but Mara dragged me in, insisting I needed to hear other perspectives. The group was small but diverse, people of all ages, backgrounds, and identities, all grappling with the same question: how do you love in a world where biology seems to dictate destiny? A woman named Aisha, a 30-year-old beta with a quiet strength, shared her story of leaving an alpha who couldn't commit. It hurt, she said, but I realized I deserved someone who chose me every day, not just when it was convenient. Her words lodged in my chest, a reminder that love wasn't just about passion, it was about choice. When I got home, Julian was there, sitting on the steps outside our building. I canceled the venue, he said, his voice hoarse. I told everyone we're postponing. I want to fix this, Elias. I want to be better. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I loved warring with the alpha he couldn't escape. Then show me, I said. Not with words, Julian. With actions. Over the next few weeks, we lived in a strange limbo. Julian threw himself into therapy, attending sessions twice a week. He started meditating, something he'd once laughed off as hippie nonsense. I saw the effort, the way he'd come home exhausted but determined, the way he'd reach for my hand with a quiet intensity. But the doubt lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. One evening, Mara invited us to a fundraiser at the marina where Julian worked. It was a chance to see him in his element, surrounded by colleagues and orcas and the wild beauty of the sound. But as we arrived, I noticed an omega, a man named Theo, 23, with striking green eyes and an easy laugh, talking to Julian near the docks. The way Julian's posture shifted, the way his eyes lingered a second too long, sent a jolt of fear through me. I excused myself, slipping away to the edge of the marina, where the water lapped against the rocks. Mara found me there, her expression soft but firm. You saw it too, didn't you? She asked. I nodded, unable to speak. The pull was still there, undeniable, and I didn't know if I could keep fighting it. The fundraiser buzzed with energy, laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of conversation about conservation and community. But for me, the world narrowed to Julian and Theo, their silhouettes framed against the twilight. I wasn't jealous, not exactly. It was worse, a bone-deep fear that no matter how hard Julian tried, nature would always win. Mara squeezed my shoulder. Talk to him, Elias. Don't let this fester. I found Julian later, away from the crowd, checking equipment on one of the research boats. His face lit up when he saw me, but it dimmed when he noticed my expression. What's wrong? He asked, setting down a coil of rope. Theo, I said simply. I saw the way you looked at him. Julian's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Nothing happened, Elias. I swear. I felt the pull. Yeah, but I walked away. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough. I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. A few heads turned, but I didn't care. I can't spend my life wondering if you're going to slip up. I deserve better than that. He stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. You do. And I'm not asking you to settle. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I can be the man you need. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was a living thing, clawing at my resolve. How? I asked. How do you prove something like that when it's not just about you? It's about who you are. Julian didn't have an answer, not then. We drove home in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on us. Over the next few days, he doubled down on his efforts. More therapy, more open conversations about his struggles. He even suggested we meet his therapist, Dr. Nguyen, a 40-year-old beta who specialized in helping alphas navigate their instincts. In her office, surrounded by books and calming sage candles, I saw a side of Julian I hadn't before. Vulnerable, raw, desperate to change. Dr. Nguyen was direct but kind. Love isn't just about feelings, she said. It's about choices. Julian's working on making the right ones, but you need to decide what you can live with, Elias. Her words echoed Aisha's from the support group, and I realized this wasn't just about Julian's journey, it was about mine. I started attending the support group regularly, finding solace in the stories of others. Aisha became a friend, someone who understood the unique pain of being a beta in a world that glorified alpha-omega bonds. Through her, I met others, people like Leo, a 28-year-old beta who'd rebuilt his life after a similar heartbreak, and Sam, a 22-year-old non-binary beta who radiated confidence despite their own struggles. One night, after a group session, I stayed late, helping Aisha clean up. "You're stronger than you think," she told me, stacking chairs. "You've been carrying this alone, but you don't have to. Whatever you choose, with Julian or without, you're enough." Her words hit me like a lifeline. I went home and found Julian waiting, a notebook in his hands. "I wrote something," he said, his voice nervous. "It's not poetry or anything, but it's for you." He handed me the notebook, and I read his words, pages of promises, fears, and hopes. He wrote about the first time he saw me, at a jazz club in Fremont, how my laugh had cut through the noise of his instincts. He wrote about the pull, how it felt like a storm he was learning to weather. "I'm not perfect," he'd written, "but I choose you, Elias. Every day, I choose you." I cried reading it, not because it fixed everything, but because it was honest. For the first time, I felt like we were fighting the same battle, not just against each other. We spent that night talking, really talking, about what a future together would look like. It wouldn't be easy, but it felt possible. The next week, Julian suggested we take a trip, a reset. We drove to Olympic National Park, where the forest met the sea, a place that felt like us. Wild, resilient, beautiful. We hiked through moss-draped trails, the air thick with the scent of cedar. At night, we camped under the stars, and Julian held me close, his warmth a reminder of why I'd fallen for him. But the pull was still there. I saw it in fleeting moments. When an omega passed us on the trail, when Julian's gaze lingered a second too long. Each time, he caught himself, squeezing my hand as if to anchor himself to me. And each time, I had to decide, was this enough? On our last night, we stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the same cliff from our early days. The wind was fierce, the waves louder than my thoughts. Julian turned to me, his eyes clear despite the storm around us. "I don't know if I'll ever be free of it," he said, "but I know I want to spend my life trying, for you." I didn't answer right away. I let the waves speak, let the wind carry my doubts. And then I took his hand, not because I had all the answers, but because I wanted to find them together. Back in Seattle, life didn't magically resolve itself. Julian continued therapy, and I kept attending the support group, finding strength in Aisha, Leo, and Sam. We didn't reschedule the wedding, but we didn't call it off either. Instead, we rebuilt, brick by brick, a relationship grounded in honesty rather than promises. One evening, Mara invited us to a small gathering at her place, a cozy loft in Belltown. Theo was there, the Omega from the marina. My stomach twisted, but Julian stayed by my side, his hand steady in mine. When Theo approached, Julian introduced me with pride, his voice unwavering. "This is Elias, my fiancé." Theo smiled, friendly but distant, and moved on. Later, Julian pulled me aside. I felt it, he admitted, his voice low. But I didn't want it. I wanted you. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real. And real was what I needed. Over time, I saw more of those moments. Julian choosing me, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. He started volunteering at the community center, helping betas and omegas navigate their own relationships. He spoke openly about his struggles, turning his vulnerability into a bridge for others. I too found my own path. I started writing, something I'd always loved but set aside. My first piece, a short essay about loving as a beta in an alpha-omega world, was published in a local magazine. Riley, the barista, was the first to read it, grinning as they handed me a celebratory latte. "You're telling our story," they said. "Keep going." Months later, Julian and I sat down to talk about the future. We were in our apartment, the sage-green walls now covered with photos of our trip to Olympic, our dog curled up between us. "I want to marry you," Julian said, his voice steady. "Not because we have to, but because I choose you. Every day, I choose you." I looked at him, at the man who'd fought his own nature to be with me, and I knew my answer. "Then let's do it," I said. "But this time we do it right. No secrets, no doubts." We planned a small ceremony, just us, Mara, Aisha, Riley, and a few others, on the cliffs where we'd found each other again. The day was crisp, the sky a rare Seattle blue. As we exchanged vows, I didn't promise Julian perfection, and he didn't promise me a life without struggle. Instead, we promised to choose each other, to fight for each other every day. When Julian kissed me, the wind carrying the scent of salt and cedar, I felt it. A love that wasn't just passion or instinct, but a choice. A love that defied biology, expectations, and fear. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd once imagined, but it was ours, hard-won and true. As we stood there, hand in hand, I thought of Quinn's words from that day on the cliffs. "You can control what you're willing to accept." I'd chosen to accept a love that was imperfect but honest, a love that grew stronger because of its flaws. And in that moment, with the waves crashing below and Julian's hand in mine, I knew I'd made the right choice. Years later, when I looked back on that eve of our almost wedding, I didn't see betrayal. I saw two people who refused to let biology define them, who built something real in a world that tried to tell them it wasn't possible. Our love wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough.